Alright, better late than never. I decided instead of overthinking it, to get right into videoing it. So, this is my dress form. My partner actually got it for me for Christmas. She names her Ebony. We thought we could also rename her if we decided to, so if you got a name for her, let me know. But I am working on a creation for an impromptu idea that we have because we are going to be going to an expo in the next couple of weeks. So, in a month actually. So we wanted to get something in nice and quick, and I won't ruin it and tell you exactly what it is, but it's definitely sci-fi, creature creation, abstract, a little bit of all of those things. Water, that's just the only thing that I'll give to kind of give it away, but I'm just rolling it right now because I have cats, and as much as you keep things clean, and a dog, you can never get rid of the animal hair. Now, there is some fluff on here that I probably could have shaved, but what I'm doing is probably going to be visible at the end. So this is more for shape, form, structure, also just kind of giving me a guideline of what I'm doing, and I wanted to enhance the talent's shoulders just as like a focal point. I may even add additional padding here just to add some more bulkiness and again like shape, and as a main feature here is to bring towards that the talent will be having some special effects prosthetics to look on. So anyway, I created this with a piece of felt, I guess you can call it, but it came from my is this one? No, it's not. That I got from my warehouse I used to work at. So there's this. And I am working on an overlayer that will be draped down from a seam that I'm going to attach here. So this is the other like layering piece. I'm considering doing a couple options. I actually totally forgot to double check if I had more of this fabric, but I did a test and I cut the corner to see what kind of circle it made, but obviously it made like a diamond. And then I cut the half circle, and it was actually kind of cool because I accidentally figured out how to make a heart shape. And now I have two kind of heart shapes, and that's pretty cool. But I just kind of got some rough measurements to make like a neck hole. Right now I know for a fact that the neck hole I am creating is going to be too small. As you see, I'm trying not to cut my fingers off with the rotary cutter. Probably doing it pretty wrong, but that's okay. I feel safe, so anyway. So what I'm doing right now is I'm definitely making it too small to audition. So one thing I do have to figure out is how to match the seam allowance to kind of fit here, which I could do some cut slots, but I also may end up just shredding this fabric in a way that complements the. I knew that this was going to be much too small for what I'm attempting to do with it, but now that it's on, I can take a look at it and say, okay, this looks like a great shape. The shape is complementing the figure, and I was actually going for a bit more of a narrow, or I guess I say a wider plunge than a narrow plunge. Although here looks a little bit more narrow, so maybe it's different orientation. But anyway, I'm gonna do something now for myself to maintain. I see. Okay, so I did the orientation of it, so now it will be the other way, which is fine. Just a little too much. So what I'm doing here is just trying to see how the fabric naturally falls, and as you see with the shoulder enhancements that I've done, it's creating this form and broadening that out. Lower it down a little bit just to kind of give some of that idea to the shape that I'm doing here. It's a deeper plunge in the front, right here. Put an F for front, which isn't very visible, but that's cool for me to know that that's the front. Stop. And here is the edge of the shoulder pad, which is what I'm referring to as, and I'd like it to at least come down here and show a good portion of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this mark to give me a reference. And I mean, that's not perfect, but it's just giving me an idea of at least the depth that I want to go to. Well, you know, it's not great, but it gives me the shape that I'm going to end up kind of trying back on the table. I folded it at the sides originally, but then this neckline didn't really match. It still isn't perfect, but I'm cutting it new anyway, so it's fine by me. I've got the F here, and you might still be able to see some of these lines that I kind of created for the shape and guideline. And so I have the first one I created here, which I know is going to be too high on the neck, and then this is going to be a little deeper. There's two lines that I have here. It might be hard to see all that, but they're rough anyway, so they're good for me only. So what I'm going to do is I'll go in and recreate this here. And now it's actually going to be 6.5. Cool. So usually I think you subtract about an inch from it. Yeah, I think so. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is actually kind of perfect, right? So okay, so that's 5.5, which would be roughly around here. And my original mark actually went over here, so I'm not that far off, and I might even end up taking it out here anyway, but for now, just gonna eyeball it. That's off, which is fine. So I'm just gonna kind of try to do something like that. Let me create a nice circle, which I see that extends past the larger one that I made, which actually ends down here. Which if I did it, it would end up actually going to here if I wanted to. So for now, just because you can always cut more, I'm gonna go in on the side maybe. And call it a hair, because I'd say it's about like 1/8 of an inch or maybe like 1/4. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of eyeball it. It's okay if it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be. Again, this might end up just getting ripped anyway and shredded. But I'd rather start off with a good, strong shape and foundation that I can. It was fun when you cut off the front mark. I cut the F off when I marked the front, but it's funny, I thought about it and I didn't correct it before I did it. But anyway, I have these marks, so that's I'm gonna remember where the front is right now. Threw it on the mannequin. What I can see is that this is now nearing the end of the shoulders, at least. Tuck this in a little better, and it's almost equidistant all around, which is great. The back is a little more, has a little more space, so a little less showing. So I'll go ahead and pull this here and turn her around so you can kind of see what that's looking like and what I mean. So I'll try to even it out, and I should be ironing all of this as I continue, but I forgot to pin it to the mannequin, but it's a learning process, and it's something that I'm having fun with, and I'm just creating something to create, so I'm training my skills all at the same time. And it works for me. So it's about 2 inches and a little more space on this side. Float it up the shoulder because that's where it seems I have a little bit more space. Even it out. And so I'm just kind of pulling it along the length to help it lay flat, and I'm pushing down the bottom layer of that shoulder pad. Because it's such a bulky material, I should probably be cutting slits into it, but again, I'm probably going to finish this in this top layer to complement it. So as it is right now, with these, about, I want to say, a little more than 2 inches, but about 2 inches, I think. Yeah, about 3 inches probably on the shoulders, about 3 inches. And just obviously I'm estimating here, that's probably closer to 4 or more. And then, yeah, probably like 4 or 5 in the front and the back, so these I might want to go ahead and leave it on the mannequin. The thing about not having scissors on you is you're forced to make do with what you got. So there, and there's uneven. I can do that just by even doing that. I can see that that line is longer, so go ahead and pull that up a little bit. It's just to kind of help me again give a good establishment. Ah, well. You see, when you do that, you realize other things, like that I don't have the tip in front. So by me cutting off that F, did an F instead of an A. Alright, love messing up or making a mistake. It's not a mess, it's just a mistake. It's a lesson somewhere. You can learn, adapt, grow, and improve your skills. So now I've got back to where it's actually kind of funny that that line ends up being almost exactly aligned with my front point. Alright, now it's there. And that's a good idea to do that is instead of a little tiny or a small half, this is all washable, so and it also goes away in with the it's air and water soluble. So the blue one is only water, so that'll probably disappear in a few moments, but it's okay for now because it'll stay there as long as I need it to. Let's get back to the burr and get ready to cut. So just needs to come up just a little bit. And you see here, I'm just gonna pull it on the inside to help it fall. And now I've got I would consider the same on both sides. Great. Now with it where it's at, go ahead and say this needs to be my new point and match it with about here. That looks good to me. Again, I'm just eyeballing. It's not math. It's not science at this point. I mean, it is really supposed to be math, but I'm just using eyeballs because it'll work for me. And again, this is a creation. Let's get into modification. So here, I have more space, and not perfect. It's okay. So you know what? The front's pretty good, so I don't want to mess it back too much. I'm going to use a good old-fashioned marker measure. This is D. I'm just pairing, so roughly about here. And then, so since I'm doing that, let me go ahead and take this, try to link those two marks together. As I'm just gradually doing it, so it can kind of try to be as smooth and pretty as possible. So not making much off, but that's okay for me. I probably could do a little more now, but that's alright. You know what, go ahead and just eyeball it, it's okay. I'm not gonna cut it. I'll eyeball it again and say, okay, this looks, it needs to go a little longer. Make it smoother. And I have some sharp ridges and all that. Okay, cool. So, now that's making me happy to look at. Take that this way, and that this way. And I actually see that here, almost all the way around, so I'll just go ahead and take that into the seam, and then that way, now I've got my new shape. Just looking at it from stepping back, I could see some, that's a little warped, I guess I could say, but, again, I'm going to just go ahead and cut it, and deal with the repercussions later. But I actually kind of created an idea for me that I think will work for what I'm trying to accomplish as far as creating the seam. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and start angling it as I cut it, which I kind of messed up there, but that's okay. So then if I mess up, I come in and I find it, see what I could do, and I just slowly round it out. Or cutting my rounded shapes with my rotary cutter, because I feel I'm in a little more control, but this works. But there's a little bit of a jagged edge here, which I obviously could just go around it, but I'm just going to cut it just because I feel like it. And now it's worse, but that's okay. Yeah, it works for me, so I'm going around, following this path that I've created with my markers, with my ability. Just continue. Since it's making any glare in the camera, you know, it would look nice. It's appealing, and I enjoy doing this. It's very peaceful for me, very entertaining. I love to sew, I love to cut, I love to create something different, and something that, you know, for me, I feel like challenges my abilities, but it also challenges the way that the conventional ways of thought. And although some of these things are probably processes that are very much existent, I do very limited amount of research and see some inspiration of what exists and how I can create something similar. And it's just basic techniques of creating a head covering, or shoulder covering I should say. And yeah, we're just trying to even this out a little bit, and just seeing where it stands out. And also letting the scissors show me. So here, even though I know this isn't perfect, the scissors didn't catch it. So I'll do it one more time, and my figure shouldn't be here. It is. That's what my scissors caught, so I'm going to let it go there. And again, I see it's a little uneven. Just create a little lip. And better than what it was. Now where this is at, I have about 2 inches, about maybe 3, and maybe about 3 or a little more, which is okay. Because again, I do want the shoulders to stick out. And even though you see all these folds here, I'm not mad at it because this was going to help create texture in the end of the product. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin here. And actually also make sure if I want to have any other aesthetic to this. What I was thinking of doing for aesthetic reasons is kind of creating a little bit of a triangle shape here on the shoulder. I don't know if it's going to help or hinder me. Might make my work harder, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Again, I'm just kind of trying to go gradual here. I feel like I still looking for black, but it's okay. We're just coming together with a conceptual idea, because that's going to go in. So I'll actually leave some seam allowance, and I'm going to go ahead and just cut off, like, I'll leave like a quarter, like a 1/2 inch, roughly, and trim the rest of it. So, yeah, hearing some barking now, I'm sure. I gotta work, so this lines up over there. That's how I do my measurements, so be mad at it if you want to be. I just kind of create a little bit of a dip in the shoulder there, and a dip on this side. I see that the other one's a little more subtle, so I do want to make it a little sharper. So I'm going to go ahead and make it a little sharper. Okay. And then obviously by looking at it from this front perspective, I can see that this comes down much further. So my eyeball technique using the top isn't going to work, so I have to use the bust of the mannequin. I'm going to go and take it down there. It still looks a little higher, so I'm going to help out with it. And I mean, it's not perfect probably, but again, I think I can do this a little bit misshapen onto the mannequin, but for what I'm doing again, it'll work for me, so I think I'm cutting it. I can make that change. And to me, that looks okay. I do the ancient method of holding the pin in your mouth because I'm unsanitary. I should stop that, but anyway. Stop it now, right? Don't be lazy. This actually has a pin pad in it. So don't be lazy, right? Or be lazy, but be smart. So I'm going to go underneath this and have these two meet. And again, my idea is for this to be folded underneath it, but so in that instance, that's why you always have your hand on there. You go ahead and just pin that in the way that works for me. Make sure I didn't go all the way through because it looked like I did for a second. And pin that in. Okay, so now I'm roughly along it. I'm going to go a little lower here just so, again, I have room for some of this to fold in. Under, I should say. Oh, hey, you know, it's supposed to be a pinhole. Why is it coming out? I guess you can replace it. Okay. Reach underneath here. Go ahead and try to get this as flat as possible. And here, I'm not going to be folding, so I'm just going to get this in it as it is. Bring this up. In it as it is. And now, yeah, I'll see some weird changes from this shoulder pad, as I continue to call it, because now I'm kind of forcing it out of its ball. Funnest thing in the world to watch people do. Add pins in clothes. Fun, right? That's why we come to these videos, to watch people figure stuff out. So again, here underneath this marker that I made, I'm going under, so to add room for the fold. And here, since I'm making sure, I'll just go flat here. I'll try and get what I mean. So since there's a little bit of a point there, I said just whatever, just go flat there. It's gonna help. It'll work for me. And again, that's all I need this to do. And again, going underneath where I'm gonna be cutting, because I am gonna be cutting it and shaping it. Let's grab 2 pins. Make it the most effective grab of pins in the world. Because we love that when things go that way. So anyway, and contouring them should be going at an angle like I've been trying to do. So now it doesn't go through. So there we go. There, now see that? I see that that's creasing. So I'm just gonna go back into it, lay it flat, hold a little bit of pressure, and educate through. And it's still creasing. So this may be a spot where I'm gonna have to add a slit, so that way it lays a little more flat. And for the pin, other than that, sound effects, always helpful. Always makes what you're doing twice as interesting. Ka-chow. Bing, bam, boop, bop, bing. Alright, so I still see some creases in the shoulder pads. And that's another thing I didn't do is pull them down. I've been holding them up, which may have encouraged some of this weird shape. That's okay. Again, it just has to work for me. And the timer go off there, but I realize I'm also kind of going off camera there. So I have purple here from the original line I marked, which made me confused, but more than likely I'm not going to be cutting that. But I might, just to do it, just because I marked it before. Anyway, you see here on the top layer, and that shoulder pad, as I continue to call it, flat together, and the pin. And here, since I'm going into that crease, you see here, boom, it's uneven. So, this is one solution. Pin it, and now it's going to be even, or it's flat, I should say. But I may just have to end up cutting it, like a slit, like a vertical slit. And that will just encourage it to, or that will assist it in laying it flat. But when I sew this together, I may actually be intentionally causing some wrinkles here, so as to create and diversify the texture of fibers, or whatever, texture on the material, so that when you look at it, it gives a more dynamic appearance and less of a flat feeling. Now what I also noticed, here I'm barely on the shoulder pads, and over here, I still have a great length of shoulder pad, so it's likely not sitting flat on this, or even on this dress form, but again, it's going to work for me. And here, you may see some ridges, but what's going to happen, I'm going to do is I'm going to sew along this, these pins, where they are, removing them, and here I'm not, let me look at this really quickly, because I can either cut here straight along this edge, and sew directly along this edge, let me think about it, or I could cut with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, roughly, and fold it in, and sew that onto the fiber. So I've got some deciding to do, but I have to flip this inside out before I do anything, because if I sew here, this is what I'll do. If I sew like this, then when I fold it, I'm not going to have the seam. I'm just going to have I'll have this and a stitch line, top stitch, which I don't want. I want it to be a flat seam. So that's a good observation for myself. So with that being said, I could go ahead and cut this shape out, and then when I put it on, again, I'll sew along here when I flip it out. I may still just leave some seam allowance here, and I can always cut it later, but I'm going to cut a vertical slit here to allow it to lay a little bit more, with a little more accessibility. So again, I'm going to go ahead and leave, it's going to be less than about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of seam allowance, which I'm going to let that stay rigid, because again, I can always cut more. I can never cut less. So I'm just going to let everyone recognize I'm going to consider be seen, but now that's cut. Again, I'm leaving right here quite some space, about 1/2 inch, a little more. And I'm going to cut that, a little bit of a vertical slit, for accessibility, maneuverability, all that. So here, that's what I did wrong. This I cut the wrong one, that's okay. Always cut more, right? Here. And that's fine, that can be a little rough, because again, I always got more than a dish. Again, now I'm going back into it and doing it after I said it was fine, but you want stuff to look good, you can do it in a, right? Sometimes you get to stop. So here we go, a little bit there, probably a little more lines here, a little bit there, but that's fine. Vertical slit. And now also doing that, I noticed that I didn't align my cut to the correct arrow, or the correct point, so I'm going to go in, and there you go, and there you go. That's pretty decent. A little bit of a snip. Alright, so I'm just going to restate this, just because in my last video there was a ton of noise and I don't know if it'll be usable or not. But what I'm going to do right now is, I realize that I pinned this in a way that helps me shape it, but not necessarily sew it. Maybe there's a way that I don't know, that I'm not experienced enough for, but I'm learning everything. So what's going to work for me right now is I'm going to take these pins out, and I'm going to put the item on top of here, facing the upwards direction. What I actually ended up doing was just trimming it out, trying to get this curve to match here. I know it's not perfect, but for me it's going to work. I'm going to go ahead and cut the angled shoulder into here and what I've decided to do is stitch along here with a basting stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and fold this over, sew it again, and then let it fall down naturally and have the seam go a little higher than this. So that way I'll have the seam I want. I tried tucking this in and pinning it, but it was not going into the position I wanted it to. I felt like I was fighting against the fabric, and it's probably an easier way, but this is what I feel comfortable doing, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take it to my sewing machine, stitch along this edge as close as I can get, and then come back in and do it again. Peek over at my sewing station with my little handy dandy light, you know. She does what she needs to do. Drop her down so she don't bother. Walk this forward. So I've got my little skeleton sewing machine, my oven mitt for some steaming, my little notions box, and then I have my Singer Heavy Duty 44S, and I just got this little setup here, added in some screws so I can hang my cutting mat, my ironing board, my yardstick. I have my lamp, my 2 lights, and my sewing machine, my 2 drawers, my dining table, chair. So I got my little sewing station here. You see my little pictures of my cats. But I have, so this is what I would have with just the native machine light. And I first purchased this light, just as really nice and handy, very maneuverable. It even has a plug in the back for like a charger or something, standard AC port. And then this is a 3-setting light that my partner got me for my birthday, or Christmas, one of the two. And it's another amazing light, even more maneuverable and way brighter than the other one I have. I mostly focus this one right towards the presser foot and feed dog because it just helps me see a lot better. This is just kind of like for the edges and lining it up. And they have so many uses. But I just got a little pair of multi-use scissors from Hobby Lobby for like, I don't know, $1 or $2. And I just have a little flathead screwdriver. And I use these for several things. This is primarily for helping me feed through when I have some very thick fabric, or if I have a spot that I need to help jump over, I'll insert this and try not to get it stuck in the needle because then I'll break the needle, and just help push it through, or push it through this way, just so it can help find the feed dogs a little better and help level this presser foot out. Which I also have, I usually have like, I'll just use this, like a piece of cardboard, which you can use anything, but let's just say this, for example. If the fabric is very thick and I'm starting on one side, it will favor the presser plate like this. So then I'll insert something, you know, the same thickness on whichever side it needs to be on, so it can more evenly distribute the pressure and feed the item through the presser foot and feed dog through the machine. I am gonna move these pens out the way for right now because the item I'm sewing is much larger, so I'm gonna kind of go ahead and try to organize my station a little bit to be more maneuverable. Pull this out the way a little bit. And that's why I also love how flexible it is, because I can have it in any direction I need it. Alright, so it's definitely not perfect because, you know, I was going around and I was just kind of going a little quickly. But I was doing my best to try to keep the presser foot roughly equidistant, but you can see right here, it's thicker, thinner, thinner, a little thicker. It's okay. I mean, in the end of the day, this is a basting stitch, which I always make sure it's on the longest length. It's a straight stitch. Tension, I have it a little high, just that's what works for me. I mean, probably could be looser, but as it works. I have it a little bit on the width, so it's not perfectly centered, but I also didn't want the needle at the left position because that was a little bit too far over. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut these. Actually, this is already pretty long. So I'm going to cut these threads with a couple of inches. The reason why is because I'm going to end up pulling through one of the excess threads and tying it together. So the reason I do that is I did a back stitch, but this just helps with some of these threads from coming undone, as I have had that in the past. I also keep some of my tools in an eyeglasses case because, you know, my eyeglasses are never going to go in there. I just too lazy to do that, I guess. I also have 3 eyeglasses cases. So anyway, I pull on the bottom thread, and you can kind of see a little loop of the top thread. I have some tweezers, and just go ahead and tease it through. Sometimes it doesn't want to come out, but I just kind of gently tug on it. I got the wrong thread out. That's okay, that's what this is for. This is the method I use. Oh, I ripped it. Yay. Oh, I was pulling the wrong thread. Which happens. There we go. Oh, I was pulling the right thread. It was just stuck underneath another thread. Which is fine. Now I have one long, one short. Might be even possible to see this short one on camera, especially when I'm not on camera, but it's in the tweezer. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this over, and I do a square knot. So to keep it with this, it's going to be long over the short, left over right, and then long over the short, right over left. So now I'm grabbing the short one. Now that's tied in the square knot. It isn't going anywhere. Snip both ends. Now I'm over here with this thread. See if I do this one right? Okay, cool, look at that. I'm gonna try. So I always like to get in their natural positions, where they're naturally pulling away from each other. And right over left. I should use the tweezers again, but that's okay. Right over left, and now left over right. You go either way, right over left, then left over right, then right over left. To keep that simple, I call it same over same, which is why I say long over short, because it's the same knot, same piece, same running end tying over to create the square knot. I collect all my threads so that they don't go running away from me. I'm going to make a little pile. And now if you look here, it's stitched very well. Even though it's a long basting stitch, which could be removed, I'm not going to remove it. Grabbing this upwards, turning it inside out, pulling it tight, and using the same method here of I'm going to align this crease through the center, sewing it just to the left here, and that should be enough to cover the original edge of the fabric. I did my 2 stitches. See one here, 1 layer, 2 layers, and I can tell it's a little bit uneven, but again, for what I'm doing with this, really the whole thing was I just didn't want there to be a visible raw edge here. I wanted to have a nice blended seam. I'm going to be adding a lot of colors to it. This is the one part where you can see a little bit of the raw edge, but again, like for that little tiny bit, I'm not going to add any stitches. I mean, I could cover that, but for what it is, and the fact that I did this entire stitching with covering 99.9% of all that raw. I skipped a little bit of a step, but I went to the fabric store because I wanted some different textures and items, and also want to challenge myself a little bit. So I purchased this seaweed lake green with a yellow green secondary layer. In the grain lines are all this darker green, and it has, I think, some black pigments in it too, and then it's layered with a yellow color fabric. And what I'm doing now is I'm creating some like lake grass textured pieces here. I included some of the selvage textured here because, I mean, again, like, more texture on this is better for me, so that looks really cool. I just layered it on top of the piece so that way I could see, you know, how it complements it and how I might want to put it on. And I've kind of done a little bit of a angled base cut just because I feel like that's going to help for layering, as well as just, again, texture reasons and overlapping, and also giving me something that I can attach to the garment itself if I'm going to sew it on, or even if I'm going to sew on a netting kind of layer. I don't know how I would word that, but I have this as a reference, which I could also add in, which if you can kind of, yeah, you can see some of these shapes. This is the same way that I cut the first stack of grass leaves, as I'm going to call them, or petals or leaves of grass. Anyway, this first one I kind of just cut them at like a half angle. I feel like it was going to work best. These look a little strange. I can always cut them off at the end. Has a little bit of a gap towards the top there, which is okay. But so since the first one went down, second one went up, which is the ones that are on the mannequin now. Third row is down, up, down, up, down, up, and the ones that are going up was the ones that I'm removing. So I'm just going and creating the shapes as I go, as it kind of seems fit. So I'm also just doing them different sizes, so there's a little bit of a variance. But these two I did thicker, this is a little thinner, so I'll go and stick with a thinner here, and I'm going to do a couple thinner ones. But anyway, so here I'm doing the triangle formation, and up here, what I'm doing at both ends, which I'll show you down here, is I'm going at an outward angle. Oh, wrong direction. Opposite to the side. So here, you might be able to see it, but it creates a little bit of like a triangle. And that's just so I can secure it, add a little bit of a layering effect, and give it some depth. So here, with this point that I made, it creates the outward angle for the next leaf of grass, which I already made the point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go a little bit more steep because of the fact that I want it to be more narrow. So here I made it's a little too thick, and I'm just doing this all by eyeball as it seems to work for me. So I go ahead and put the marker down and eyeball it, that it's roughly the same thickness throughout. I could use the grid lines here, but this fabric isn't laid completely even, so that probably wouldn't help to make it more linear. It would just probably confuse me more. So I stop here. That one looks weird, but anyway. Stop here, and at the bottom, I go ahead and do a bit of an outward angle, which creates, oh, I realize here these are not even, so I'll go a little lower. And then since this is too thick here, I'll go ahead and remind myself, which is the followed line. Here, line this up, and make it roughly as even possible. Even if it's a little crooked, that actually helps with the textures of it. So there it is, boom. That's a little crooked, which this is I can straighten out just a tiny bit. Boom. And this is air and water soluble ink, so if it doesn't disappear in time, I could just go ahead and wash this, which I wash everything after I create it anyway, just for hygiene purposes. So there you go, that's cut there. And I'm just using a 45mm rotary cutter, just having it get smooth, lines straight as I possibly can. Angle this light so I can see better. And I'm kind of just going back and forth action to try to help make sure I'm going through it. I probably need to replace this blade, but you know, right now I'm just making it work. Alright, so now that I've reached the end of this blade of grass, I go ahead and clear this out the way the best I can, get underneath it so I don't cut the other pieces I just finished. Cut that side of the corner really, really well. Come in from this side, cut that very well. And now I'm going to run up this side, which I had already started, And I tried, if I could do it one pass, it'd be awesome. But I'm just going to put some pressure down, which I can already tell I'm not going all the way through. See right here? There, it didn't go all the way through. And even if I'm not exactly on line, that's fine too, but again, you know, this is supposed to be natural textures anyway, so they're not going to be, in nature, it's not going to be exactly straight, so. Boom, boom. A little bit far off on the line there, which I don't like to do, but it works just fine. Again, these are natural textures I'm creating, so got a little bit of leeway with that. Snap that in. Here again, it's not perfect, but that's fine. And now, in my opinion, those are decently looking petals of grass, or leaves of grass. And I'll continue, see here, in my back and forth actions, I created a misalignment. Even more than it was already, so try. Oh, you see there? I already cut it, so now go ahead and line the cut edges, and I'll figure out the rest later. But now that this is cut, gotta figure it out, and that's what works for me. So I'll go ahead and take this excess here, since I just messed it up, clean it up a little bit. Boom. Now that's a little more even. This edge is a little longer, so when I go to cut it, I'm gonna cut it a little weird, just so I can kind of complement the longer paths. And now this top one does have a bit of a flat edge, but these bottom ones have more of a pointed edge. So again, that increases my textures and variety within the layers. So as I begin to apply this to the costume, I'll actually have greater depth due to the variance between the layers. So, I mean, when you're working with natural textures, making mistakes or mishaps, in my opinion, works to your favor, not only to teach you things, but give you greater variety in your work of art. That's cut now, and I just continue following that same motion. And now that I'll just point these two downs away from my necks. I'm going to go ahead and draw like 3 more and just go along. Was taking a closer look at my camo pattern here, and I kind of noticed that these are just like half circle cuts in different orientations, and I did some searching. I only found one relatively similar video. It looked a little partially complete to me, but I'm mimicking more or less what they did in the video, except with a little bit amount of variety, where I did some shorter strokes on the top end and longer strokes on, well, I guess you could say on opposite ends. And to fill the space in the middle, at the moment I've put straight slashes, and having a hard time deciding if I'm going to keep it that way or if I'm going to add a slight curvature to them. And my main concern is I don't know if I really want it to blend in on one side or the other. I don't really know if I'll be comfortable enough, especially with this blade. I don't have an X-Acto knife, but to do like an S-curve, if that even makes sense. I think everyone can understand that, but I'll just do one here to kind of emphasize something, maybe not that drastic, like that, to bond them together so they could theoretically be units. But my fear with this, especially with that, is if I cut that, then I'll just be making strips. So I think I'll start at this moment. I think I'll stick with the straight slashes. I think that kind of answered my own question. One thing I do want to add is because sometimes this blade can get away from you. Even here, probably very difficult to see in here and here. I could see that the blade cut very far from where I was aiming into, because it's a round blade and it's, in my opinion, a little bit more difficult to aim. You always want to be careful with your hand positionings. At the moment, I don't have any cut sprays me, but I have had small nicks before. You just always want to use this blade and attempt to your best to always, no, I shouldn't say attempt, you should always cut away from yourself. And your hand should never be positioned in front or on the trajectory of the blade. So I am not perfect at practicing as always, but even here where I'm trying to hold the fabric down, this blade, if I go straight forward, would not, in aspect, cut me. But this blade does have maneuverability to it, so sometimes I've noticed when I'm cutting, you'll see I'm not exactly on the line, and I'm doing my best to stay close to the line, but you'll veer. And especially with fabric underneath it, you don't know the exact trajectory it will take, because the fabric can manipulate the trajectory of the blade. And if there's something underneath it that you're maybe not aware of, incidentally something gets caught underneath it, it can catch your fingers. And I just changed this out to a sharper blade than when I started this project, because it was just stalling out and I was working much harder than I need to be. And before I was having a hard time cutting about 4 layers, but even with that blade, I would still bet money it would cut into your finger, and it would be painful, and wouldn't be a great experience to have. So you always want to have safety in your mind, safety in your craft, and take your time. If it takes you more time to get done correctly and safely, do it. And don't let anyone rush you, including yourself, because that's how mistakes are made. And some mistakes are reversible, but if you get injured, you get sent to the hospital. It ain't gonna work. That commission ain't gonna pay them bills. It might, but it ain't gonna reverse your injury. Open it up and see what it looks like. Did pretty good cutting all these things, and I did well with all the middle cuts, except here I went somewhat all the way through, and over here I went somewhat all the way through. So now I'm going to open it up. Looks like fish skin, which is pretty awesome. An unattended effect, which is always something that can be usable, even if it's not my seaweed, grass-like material, or vegetation, I should maybe refer to it as. Flip the other way around. Okay, so it looks cool. It looks great to me. Looks like most of these cuts went through all the layers. Now I'm just quickly checking, so let's see here. Let's open this up. And that's fully open. And let's back this up. Alright. So, as is. I like that it's different, but I feel like it's very similar to what I was doing already, and it just gives a textured look. It didn't do that, which again, I could see that these are much closer together, and while they are the same direction and the alternate direction, they're not so far apart. Whereas here I probably could have done a curved line opposite direction, but then I'd have to go again a curve, and with the tight constraints I'm working on, I feel like in a time-saving mentality, the original concept that I was creating, Blades of Brass, looks a lot more realistic, where this is going for like skin texture. I want to go with like armor outfit style instead of debris, which is, I'm going for debris. So I was trying to crack a code here, and I've learned something new, and it doesn't exactly work for what I intended it to, but I'll find a purpose within the project. My next layer of fibers, and I have a couple of ideas with this, because, oh, there comes my little guest star, Mr. Bones. Yeah, wait, since you want to scream on the camera, you have to introduce yourself.
Mr. Bones.
Oh,
Mr. Bones.
Mr. Bones. Here you go. You can be the guest star. Alright, so, since it has a lot of loose fibers, I feel like there's a couple of ways that either I can strip these fibers and intertwine them somehow, or I can layer them in a thin manner, which is how I'm going to cut them, and I'll show you that, and create kind of like a mesh to be like algae. It can also be even just as is with that flat texture, could still be like matted algae, so I might even use something like this as partial fill. I don't want to use too much because I want there to be some transparency to the layers so you can see through what else is going on throughout the piece. But what this brings up too, as a good demonstration, is how I fold my runs of fabric. This is actually a blanket that my partner got when she went to the hospital, and she donated it to my cause because we're probably never going to use it any other way. But it's natural fibers. It dyes very easily. It tears very easily, so I can make some good textures with this, and I can design it in many ways. But back to the point of what I'm saying is, when I make a cut on a fabric, I always do my best to fold everything uncut inside, and I try to leave the cut layers on the outside. This helps me, one, remember that the fabric is cut, and two, where I cut it. So that way, when I go back to the piece, I can always cut from the same side, or I can always judge, you know, if I'm working on something that needs a larger space, is this going to be enough? I mean, obviously here I have a lot of yardage, I guess you can call that. I have a lot of area that I can use, but in a smaller piece of fabric, this is a good habit to build, for me at least. So when I go to it and I say, you know, is there enough? You know, okay, well look, I have 3/4 of the piece missing, may not be enough. This makes this the grain line, which is parallel to the selvage, and I forget what the actually, let me double check that. Yeah, there's a little more stretch going this way. So anyway, I forget what this horizontal line is called. I don't want to say any wrong names, but anyway. And the reason for that is so I can know how to cut the fabric, because you usually want to cut with the grain line. If you're cutting against the grain line or perpendicular to the grain line, you want to do that all the same in the piece. Now, considering this is a accessory, I don't know if it'll make too much of a difference, but you should always try to cut the same style throughout your garment or your work of art. So back to where I'm at. So since I already cut these against the grain line, I'm gonna cut it both ways, but I mean, this was something totally different that I worked on that I just cut. That was actually a sample piece that I was trying to learn the fabric a little more. So what I'm thinking is, let me see how I did the other one. It appears like I cut it against the grain line. It appears as such. So that would mean cutting this direction in this case. And that was kind of the direction I was going to go anyway, so I can even this out a little better. But I do want, since in this case as well, the grain line is going to be the longest edge, I do want some longer pieces to give me more texture. So, let's see. I'm figuring it out as I go, because being honest, I don't really feel like ironing it, and I feel like it's so many layers that it's going to cost me more time than I really have to try to complete this project. And again, this is going to be something that I'm probably going to just tear up in pieces anyway, so the complete accuracy is not entirely important. My ADD, ADHD self always says, oh, it's got to be perfect, and then you can mess it up. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to mess it up. So I'm attempting to grab all the selvage together so I can at least have a generalized structure. Alright, so back to the original fold. Now why did I unfold it and refold it? Again, that was just to make it a little bit easier to understand how the fabric is shaping, how it's falling. I like to work with the natural shapes of the fibers because I've learned when you work against it, you lose. Almost always. You can find ways to win, but you almost always lose. In the end, at least. So, now that I've got it mostly aligned, pull some of this excess. Boom. I'm happy with that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, now again here, I'm going to probably ruin the entire piece by cutting this end, but I know that this is for a greater cause. And I want super long strands because I want to be able to create something like algae. So, I don't have an electric cutter. I almost wanted to do this here, but I feel like this rotary cutter isn't even half as, I mean, if you press it down, it's about half as thick. You never know until you try it, right? So let's see. It's a new blade, so let's give it, take the sharp blade away while I fix this. Always want to do that. Close the blade, put it away from you when you're doing something so you don't end up cutting something important. Alright, so I'm going to start somewhere here in the middle, right against this selvage because I know it's not perfectly aligned. So if I do this, at least I'll get a good amount of these layers and just see what I'm working with. Alright, so it's taking a little bit of effort, but it's going through. I heard it hit the silicone cutting mat there. And if this is faster, I would say, I guess it is. when I was cutting it, it was cutting like pretty curved. Like down here was pretty straight and up here was really curved. So I know that's from me like dragging the fabric as well as it wasn't fully aligned to begin with. So I did bring in my ironing board. I was going to iron it, but I decided to go a little bit of the easier way, and I sort of, I aligned it pretty well on this cutting mat. I'm just kind of straightening it out a tiny bit here because I did it with the top, not the bottom, but anyway, that's okay. And then I used 2 points from the cutting mat, lined it up to the best of my ability, cut it pretty straight now, so it looks a lot more pleasing for me. I see up here kind of warped a little bit, and it got away from me. It's a little curved in here and then curved out from the original trajectory, but that was because up here was so crooked that I was basically cutting just a tiny amount off of it to try to get it as even as possible. But by doing that, you know, you're kind of playing with the will of the blade there, and it was just a little bit thick, and I'm putting a lot of force on it, so it maneuvered the fabric a little bit. But although I am eyeballing these measurements, I would like it to remain as usable for the future as possible. So now that it is more usable with the linear abilities, or I used to say the more that since it's more aligned now, I feel more confident cutting it. And I feel more at ease knowing that, because at the end of the day, this is not only for this project. I want to use this in the future, and I don't want to... Ooh. Well, I'm cutting off the side of my dresser, and that just slipped there, which shows you the ability of dangers that exist here. So I do want to address that issue before I continue cutting, because I don't want any problems or any mistakes that could be dangerous. So just taking a look at what I have. Because I have another table, but I don't really want to bring it in. My space here is a little limited. So I'll just slide this board up a little bit. Take it easy, a little less pressure than what I just did. And I'll start on the table to give me something solid to go from. So when I come down here, the thing is, since I'm cutting some of the layers, this blade is dulling already. Which is okay, because it's still cutting. I hear it going all the way through. And what I recognize is also happening is the tool is touching my straight edge here, which is lifting it off the fabric. So now I get a little tricky here, and I'm trying to separate it so I can see the edge, and boom. Take your time with something that's a little more tricky, so you're less likely to have an issue. Thank God I did not have any issues there, but I very well could have. So I am lining it up. There's the edge of the straight edge. I don't remember what these are called. I think they're called tacks, but so I'm lining it up using the second tack, going up the fabric. So here it's a little closer in, and here it's a little further out, which I'm aware of already. And I'm also using that idea to confirm that it is as straight as possible. Just again, because that's just what I like to do and works for me. So I'll go back up here, and I see the fabric moving a little bit, but that's okay if it's a little bit off. Like a millimeter or something, I'm not going to notice. So now I'm going to pull this back so I don't end up cutting into the wall, or scratching the wall. Up here, in this edge of the fabric is where I have those issues, so I know I could jump in and boom, hit the wall, and damage my wall, which I don't want to have to paint or fix, which I already have to do actually, but try to avoid more damage. There you go. This is cut. It looks nice and pretty. That's how I want it. And I'm making just a little pile here. As this pile continues to grow, I'll reach a point where maybe it's about double the size it is now. My fabric line will be here. I'm not going to pass this no matter what. Even if I don't feel like I have enough, I believe that would be more than half the fabric actually, so I wouldn't want to go past that, especially because that's the edge where I already cut before. And I just want to keep some for other projects. I don't want to use it all in one project, especially because I may not end up using all of this. You know, I'm just kind of right now eyeballing what I feel I need in the project, and it's not always the smartest approach, but when you're working on something that has kind of come up in your mind, so to speak, I feel like it's okay to go with like erring towards the side of making too much rather than not making enough, and then, you know, you can always use it on something else. But in this instance, you know, I'm going to be dyeing these pieces green and probably brown as well. Ooh, I did say I wanted some solid pieces, and I'm glad I remember that now. So the reason I'm cutting this way, I think I said it before already, is to get some very long lengths for hanging foliage, hanging like moss, algae, and mixed with vegetation, obviously. So before I continue going too far, I want to decipher where I'll be cutting from a nice square to rectangle piece. I'm thinking about cutting it here, equaling this out. I mean, either side I cut from, I'll be removing some of the length, and I don't really want to unfold it right now. So I also want to get an idea how much shape I want. So here I'm going to take my straight edge and I have about 12 inches here. Down here seems a little less. I mean, this isn't, I don't even know where this crease came from, probably from the way I folded it originally, so 12 inches, a little less, a little more than 12 inches. I can see it's a little crooked as far as judging from this line. And here about 12 inches. So 12 inches on, I'll use my chest, is almost the entire front part of your chest. So across the breastplate, you know, this is extending. I mean, of course everyone has broader widths, but I'm similar to the talent that is going to be used. And I would, again, like some transparency. So I'm going to go for like 6 inches, roughly. And let me just look at it again. And here's a good way, too, for me to know this. I'm going to line it up with the edge of the fabric. 6 inches. And I'll just go ahead and line it up with the edge of the fabric again. And I'll just pull it down to the 3. So that means the 9. Wait, somehow I didn't line that up. That's okay. It's 3. 9. That's okay. Oh, my TV is coming on now. One moment. TV does that when you pause something. It just automatically starts playing itself, which is, I don't know why they made that feature, but whatever. Not the end of the world. Alright, so with that shape, I just wanted to eyeball it, look at it, and see, you know, what do I think? Is it too big? Is it too small? I mean, on my hand, that's like, you know, probably almost nearly wrap around the entire arm. Getting quite a bit of layers from it. I might, again, like, think about if I want it to be 6 inches, and just in case I end up sewing something together, I want to leave an inch of seam allowance. Just because it's 1/2 inch on both sides, it gives me plenty of room to make changes, have errors. I like to attempt my best to lean towards my errors, you know, because it happens. We all make errors. If you think you don't, you need to look again. And a good question that, you know, popped in my head that some may ask is, you know, why did you make a square here if you're going to end up cutting on the edge? First of all, I didn't really know where I was going to cut. I wanted to see what the size looked like, and I felt like within the balance of the white, it would have been easier for me to tell the size comparison to the entire project versus here, I know that it's larger, but as an inch larger, to me, it almost looks the same size. With the depth perception of this edge, I don't know, that's how it looks to me right now. But I felt like, again, just looking at it, within the entirety of the fabric, I have, you know, you can get like a little bit of tunnel vision or, you know, a little bit lost in the process to be weary of some of these things I would like to put in the middle so I can have a greater view, especially in comparison to the fact that I want to maintain some of this fabric. And I can tell this blade is definitely getting much duller, but I've been cutting with it a lot, and I'm sure I could sharpen these. I don't have the means to necessarily, but I'm sure I can figure it out at some point. What I'm also doing is I'm just going in and breaking this edge here, the binding there, and just doing that to give it some more length. And I don't want this in there. I mean, the green is fine; it's not going to bother me. But I also just don't want like so much bulkiness, and I want versatility. If I want to create bulkiness, that's up to me. But I'm also trying to create this project to be very nice, a little bit chaotic in the right ways, but not haphazard. You know. And I'm just moving this at a diagonal because I'm facing the table in an awkward way. Probably should be doing it a little differently, but this is what works for me. It's quick, so just just cutting out a small piece of this. Interesting. I remembered about this when I was doing my cuts, and it didn't make a difference. But here, it kind of does make a difference, especially when you make measurements. Is these front 2 layers are well aligned. This one sits higher, so it's a little longer. It has a longer edge here, and these were not only lower, but they're folded. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I can cut them, I can shape them, I can do whatever. They are just under 6 inches, so 6 by 7. I mean, you know. That ends up making them around 12 inches long because they're folded down the middle, which I only have 2 layers, so 1, 2, 3, 5 pieces, and these are a little longer, which is cool to have some depth too. Some could be longer, some could be wider, some could be, you know, different. So that's cool. Something to keep in mind. I mean, yeah, of course, if I would have opened it up and ironed it, it would have definitely lined up a lot better. But as such a large piece, it's hard for me to work on my own, and you know, I don't want to inconvenience anyone to have to help me fold it, so and I don't want to fold it on my bed because then it's going to get full of cat hair because I have 3 cats. Oh, and a dog, so dog hair too. Anyway, I've got these pieces ready to go. I have a little pile here, as well as I did bring in a reusable bag so I can try to stay a little more organized because this is eventually going to turn into chaos. I did want to keep these strips piled just because I want to continue to see how they grow and just eyeball how much I need. So now that I've cut out that square, I have two thoughts of one, cutting another square that's already 7 inches, so I might do like 7 by 6 just to cut less. Let's see what that would look like. So that would be, I've got 13 inches, so that would be just a little less than half of what I have left here. So that would give me 7 inches, 14, since it's folded in half, 14 inches in length. I still feel like I would like some more pieces that are longer. So, since I have 7 inches here, I will go ahead and I'll take off an inch. And I'll make them 6 by 6. And in doing so, I will give me some longer strips, cut the square, give some shorter strips, and then I'll cease at that point. Start coloring them and figuring out how much more I might need in just a few minutes. So now I'm going to start cutting some more and go from there. I got a little bit excited. I started moving pretty fast. I was doing well, and I always handled it pretty well. But like anybody, I'm human. I make mistakes, and I put my thumb a little too close to the edge of my straight edge, and I run this blade too quickly. Back on it, wasn't paying attention, and I nicked myself. And it's a double funny thing. And luckily, it was sharp enough, and not too sharp to go too deep, but sharp enough that it cut clean. And I remember, I leave rags in here because I always forget, and then I do something like this where I go, well, I can spread this a little easier. Anyway, yeah, so I nicked myself with it. Feels a little painful, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world, not the end of the day. And it's a lesson to myself to just sometimes, slow down. You can work quickly, but it must be safe. And I, made so many points about it too. I feel a sense of responsibility to call attention to it that, I made that mistake when I shouldn't make that mistake. And, mistakes are okay, but the lack of safety, the lack of proper execution of your safety is not, in my opinion, that's not okay. Because that could, send you to the ER. Thankfully, it wasn't serious enough to send you to the ER or cause permanent disfigurement or injury. But, it's always a good refresher to understand the mistakes you make and learn from them. I've been practicing always sheathing the blade when I'm not using it, but I clearly, even in the speed of the moment, need to be weary. Boom, tuck your thumb in, because again there, just a moment ago, I was moving the blade in the direction of my fabric, and my hand was, maybe not all the way, but so just tuck it in. I can apply the pressure. I can hold it just fine that way. Might be not as comfortable, but I'd rather be a little less comfortable and a little more safe than the other way around. So, good lesson, good learning, and adapt. Make your changes. Do better. There, I didn't tuck my thumb in, so I'm making myself weary. My thumb is far enough away, but gotta be more precarious. Gotta watch what I'm doing, because if that's not, that's how I'm gonna get injured. And final cut of these shorter pieces after I made my 6-inch adjustment cube, as I'm gonna call it right now, because that's what's in my mind for whatever reason. All right, so I kind of cleaned up my area a little bit. I've been taking these little shavings, and I don't know, I could always throw them away later, so I'm just right now sweeping them into my bag of goodies. All my strips, I've left some of them folded together. I'm going to separate them all as I begin the dyeing processes, because I'm going to do some of these different colors, different shades, different tones, all that, and just kind of experiment, have some fun. I'm seeing here some barking from our family senior dog, but I can't do much about it right now. I got to work, and I'd like to include some of the work here so it can be seen. So I've already went ahead and dyed some shoulder pads that I'm going to be using for the character design. I'm going to be placing some of this vegetation over the top here, sort of like a extra layer of protection and all that, a lot of different intentions for it. So what I'm doing right now is I have them with the bottom side facing up. I have some paper here just to protect my silicone surface that I don't want to get my glue on, which I can clean that very easily, but I just don't want to be bothered with it right now. So I've already went ahead and pre-measured the same distance, 2 inches between the two, and I'm going to be attaching them horizontally across these just so it kind of cinches down the entirety of it. And I'm leaving both sides together so that way I can make sure they're the same size, lined up, all that stuff. So I'm going to be using the toothed edge or the hooked edge on here, just so that way the hook is facing down. I just feel like that's more complementary. This fabric seems to snag more than the other fabric, so I want to avoid any issues in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these. I'm going to put some glue down here, peel off the adhesive, set it down. It's not going to be the permanent fixture I am going to sew it into, but this is just so it can hold down for the time being. I'm considering, just thinking of it over in my head now actually, as if I wanted to adhere these first and then glue them, so that way, no, because then if I sew this into that, it will mess that shape up, so perfect. I'm going to go ahead and decide the position here, which I want it to be somewhat central. I was going to have it a little higher up, but I feel like this will hold a little better. Maybe I'll angle it somewhat a little higher than just in the middle, so roughly here. So I will over apply, like apply over where the edges would be, and I'm going both directions, up and down and left to right, back and forth, just to kind of make sure that it gets on as many of these fibers as it can. So that seems about fine. And here, roughly there. So boom, 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 boom. And so make sure it gets on all these fibers as best as possible. And this again, one more time. And that's settled. So the reason I'm doing this is just to hold on for it for the time being. I could use a basting stitch, but this will save me a little bit of time. And I could use the pins, but I feel like the pins typically, in my opinion, when I use them, they tend to bunch up the fabric a little bit. And even if I put them in diagonally, you know, any direction, there seems to be a little uneven texture to it. And I want to try to create a flat, even working surface. So I'm going to place this down, take a look at it before I apply some pressure, and boom. And that's fine for me. Same over here, peel it, and place this down. Try to even it out as best as I can. Boom, apply some pressure. Alright, so now that these are here and settled, do a little more pressure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm just going to push a little bit more on the corners and the edges. Okay, I'm happy. Now, here with this, I have many ways that I could start. I can either start at the bottom or the top, or that's 2 ways really, but I think I want to go ahead and start from the bottom, just so I can layer it a little easier. And I'm going to go ahead and glue this first, roughly about inch and a half. And I'm not actually going to go too crazy on this, mostly because, glad I caught myself, because I was just about to apply these and realized that I need to stitch this on first, due to the fact that I want it to stay. So it's good that I have this paper. Now I can attach it to this paper and deal with that problem later. I much prefer working with a clean sewing station, but right now I'm on a little bit of a time crunch, so I've got to work with what I have. So I have a bunch of stuff on here. It's a little tight, so it's still a nice little camera angle, I think. I'm going to peel off the top layer. I'm going to leave on this paper because it's not going to affect my sewing in any way. Make sure that the needle is completely straight. I'm going to turn the tension down to about 2. And straight stitch. Got a little bit of a large needle on here, but I'm dealing with a funny situation, so I'll let it go. Alright, that's together. Forgot those 2 most important parts of setting this up is having it plugged in. Gotta put a little hook there so my cord doesn't fall on the floor all the time. Alright, slow down a little bit. Alright, plug this in. Okay, turn it off. Now we're in business. Again, sorry for a lot of excess noise and background stuff going on. Beautiful house, you know? Yeah, look, I don't know if I'm doing this right yet. It's gonna work for me, so. I do believe the needle is much too large for making some holes in the Velcro, but it'll work for me. I see some weird stuff going on. I'm gonna go ahead and finish the stitch I'm on. I'm gonna turn the tension up just about halfway between 2 and 3. And see what's going on here. I can fix it. Really also probably the glue and the thickness and material and probably all causing issues. me put some more pressure down on the presser foot. Looks like it's lifting it up. Looks weird there. Went over the Velcro intentionally so I can help secure that since some weird stuff's going on. Let me go back one more because I'm also kids. I wonder, is that my teeth up? It looks like it's not really. It could just be the glue. Looks like my, yeah. Looks like my teeth there. Yeah. I forget where the lever is. That was over here. Well, so I'm not gonna worry about it right now. Put this in here. Next, put it all in. Here's rough paper. Gold, didn't leave too much of nothing. Looks good to me. I like it. Alright, so I don't know what it is, but it looks like the bottom thread isn't even being looped through, so it looks like the top thread is just laying like flat, but I mean, so I've made the conclusion of putting the longer pieces and maybe some of the thicker I'll be layering throughout, but the longer pieces obviously have to be at the bottom because I don't want the shorter to get completely covered. Although I may interlayer some shorter pieces with the longer just so I can create a little bit of dimension. I have one very long strand of grass that I was hesitant to add it on the shoulder because I was thinking, oh, you know, it might look a little weird or whatever, but you know what? I'm adding it. It has been added. I can't go back now. I mean, I could, but I'm not going to go back now. So that's there. It's very long, so I'm not even going to pull it forward and show it. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep layering these. So I'm going to go over this one a little bit. And, you know, I'm just trying to create a little bit of some windows, a little bit of some depth, and just create textures, create change, create diversity within this piece. I recognize there's going to be a lot of pieces on here, but I will probably become more sparing as I go up just because I don't want to use all of my seaweed type material in one or in two pieces, because that's the thing, there's also two of them, so whatever I use here has to be somewhat reflective of what's on the other. So as I'm going through, I'll time lapse this so you don't have to go through the boring steak of putting these one by one, but just wanted to give a little bit of the intro of what's going on and what is the intention of that of which that is going on. Oh, I won't be using that glue method again. I definitely know that I likely used an excess amount of the glue, but I was just running into so many issues with it getting all over the presser foot, all over the needle, and just I'd rather fight with the fabric and the bulkiness and everything than to fight with glue. You don't win with glue. All right, that's what I've created here. Everything is sewn in to the best of my ability. Not perfect. I left the excess threads because it's going to add texture. Some of these got roughed up, which it just makes me so happy to see them a little roughed up because that's what I would like. And that's just kind of like some of the hanging effect to it. It'll look so much more fantastic on the actual model. And I never quite learn things. I'm like, I can defy the truth. You know, I am going to attempt the glue again, but with a couple major differences. First major difference is I'm gonna sew one strip at a time. It just seems like it's gonna be magnificently easier that way. Let me choose a thicker one just for this base, just because I feel like that speaks to me. Anyway, and what I'm gonna do is on top, I'm gonna take the piece here and glue the strand. I feel like because there was such an excess of glue, and glue was just everywhere, it's part of the reason why it did not cooperate with me very well. So now here, a little bit of glue on the edge. It's stuck to the fibers here. A little pressure, and I'll do two more on each side, well, one and one. If you know, I'm just gonna get like a layer here, and then I'll do one stitch straight across. Drop my glue lid on the floor, which is okay. So boom, here, a little pressure. This one's a little, I'll save this for a little later. It's a little short. This is a little short. Okay. And go a little bit down the neck of the blade. And now I've got these three here that I can simply sew straight across, but I still have these little edges here. So I think I might just go ahead and steal at least one more so I can test it. Just see how I sew across here if it goes well. I'm going to go at a little bit of an angle. Oh, because I'm doing too much twisting work there. That didn't stick. This is over here I may cause an issue for myself, but that's okay. What learning is all about. So here, a little bit on it. That's a bit much, but you know what I'll do is I'll fold this piece of paper over it, smooth some of that off, because again I don't want to have any issues. So this is, well, I'm going to go at an angle, and this is just, again, you know, some depth. This one I want to go a little thinner. I feel like the other one I used a lot of my strands, which is okay, but I may end up using more here as well. I probably will, because I liked the heavy look and I want it. This type of grass, where I get the inspiration from, is a bunching grass, so it grows in clumps. Clumping, bunching, probably the same thing. Anyway, it grows in clumps, and they don't grow in individual blades. So, I mean, they have blades, excuse me, but each blade is connected together to a cluster of the grass. So it's not like you would just have individual pieces coming off. If you ran into it, you would likely run into a whole cluster. Or even if they are separate, they probably would naturally weave together and clump, you know. So that's why I want them all bundled as much as I can, a little bit thicker. I don't want them too thin. This right now to me is too thin, so if, as I continue to add layers, I feel like it's still too thin, I'll go back in and thicken this layer up. And the others, obviously. To get a nice uniform piece. So now these are stuck together. I'm already happier. Didn't have to fight this much. And I'm just going to leave these threads hanging, because that's fine by me. So now I'm going to go up and, I think it's called a windowing, just window or window boxing. I think it's just window. Anyway, I'm going to window these roughly, and so I'm going to put in, can't see my hands there, some strands into where there are gaps to create that layering effect. Alright, so some of these things were not recorded in the process. I forgot to record some things and also got caught in the moment, because today is the day that I will be applying this to my Camo. So there are many things that I created that will not be included in the final piece, but what I have done here is I put it all together and I created what to me speaks well. And some of the extra layers would have made it a little bit too busy, a little bit too intentional. Some of these that I created, which I had different ideas for these, but the time and the necessity of it really wasn't there. So I did not ever record, and I realized this rope that I created, which was a all-white rope that I did different dye dips in, and I created it to look nice and dingy. These pieces of grass were airbrushed by my partner from, this is one that hasn't been airbrushed because I added it later. It has a little bit of texturizing airbrush on it, but I may do some touch-ups in a little bit. But I've attached some fishing line here because this is a lake monster. So there's going to be natural and unnatural things that come from, you know, humans and animals and, you This is from a boat, fisherman, you know, all that. So here's the seaweed that I created the strips of, and I created it into a necklace style. I have some algae that I got from the dollar store. It's actually reindeer moss, and I put some pieces on it, scattered around. Probably could use some more on the body, but I like where it's at right now, and I don't want to make this too busy of a garment. So this is what I have. I attached some netting material here, so it's the side view of it. I attached what's like to be like algae or moss, or a little bit of growth here on the shoulder. Trying to have these all laid as much separation as possible. We're not really going to be shooting the back, so I've left it as is. I mean, I've done a couple, you know, this is over here, and this is glued down a little bit. You can see kind of a little bit of the pool. This is glued down as well. There's the other shoulder. I have some of the green netting, some of the gray netting. It's been airbrushed. Here's the remainder of the rope. Here's the remainder of the seaweed. And I may make some changes once it's on the talent. But this is, oh, you know, see, I just pulled the glue off trying to separate this, but I must have glued that down there. That's okay. Just separate some of that over here. Give it that texture, a little bit of variance. You know, myself, I feel like there's more I could do here. I'd like to do more, but today's the day. I'm doing last looks on it. Just seeing what else I might want to do. If I want to glue some more stuff on it, on the body. I'm going to keep reviewing it, but for right now, this is what I do as the final project.